The massive chamber filled with alien voices as Jake Morrison stood in the center of the room. His uniform was clean and pressed, but his face showed the weight of representing all of humanity. Around him sat creatures from 47 different worlds, each one judging his species like they were deciding the fate of criminals. The Galactic Council had been meeting for 3 days now. Jake had listened to witness after witness tell lies about humans. They called his people aggressive. They said humans were too violent to live among civilized beings. They claimed that Earth's military was too strong and posed a threat to peaceful worlds. Dr. Lisa Hayes stood beside Jake, her tablet full of evidence that none of these aliens wanted to hear. She had spent years studying their cultures and learning their languages. She knew more about galactic politics than most of the representatives in this room. But they would not listen to her because she was human. The Vorthic ambassador rose from his seat. He was tall and thin like a giant insect, with 4 arms and eyes that looked like broken glass. When he spoke, his voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. The humans have built weapons that can destroy entire planets, he said. They have ships that can travel faster than anything we have ever seen. They train their children to fight before they can even walk properly. How can we trust such beings? Jake wanted to laugh, but he kept his face calm. The Vorthic had been fighting wars with their neighbors for over 2,000 years. Their own military was 3 times larger than Earth's. But somehow humans were the dangerous ones. A floating creature made of blue energy spoke next. The Zephyrians always acted like they were better than everyone else because they had given up physical bodies long ago. This one pulsed with colors that Jake's translator said meant anger and disgust. Your species cannot even achieve peace among yourselves, the Zephyrian said. You have wars on your own planet. You fight over resources and territory like primitive animals. What makes you think you belong among civilized races? Lisa stepped forward before Jake could answer. She was small compared to most of the aliens in the room, but her voice carried clearly to every corner of the chamber. You want to know why we fight? She asked. Because we have learned what happens when good people do nothing. We have seen what happens when civilizations become soft and weak. We build strong militaries because we know that somewhere in the darkness there are things that want to destroy everything we love. The chamber erupted in clicks and whistles and electronic sounds as the aliens argued among themselves. Jake caught fragments through his translator. Some called Lisa's words foolish. Others said humans were just making excuses for their violent nature. A few seemed thoughtful, but they were clearly outnumbered. The oldest member of the council was an Eldari named Keeper Voss. His body was made of living crystal that had grown for over 5,000 years. When he spoke, everyone else fell silent because his people had been around longer than any other spacefaring race. In all my years, Voss said slowly, I have seen many species rise and fall. Some fell because they were too aggressive and made enemies they could not defeat. Others fell because they were too peaceful and could not defend themselves when danger came. The humans seemed to understand both sides of this balance. Jake felt a moment of hope, but it died quickly when Voss continued speaking. However, the ancient being said, their methods are too extreme. They prepare for wars that may never come. They see threats where none exist. This makes them dangerous to the stability we have worked so hard to build. The Corvin representative stood up next. Her people looked almost human except for their silver skin and completely black eyes. They were traders and diplomats, always trying to find the middle ground in any conflict. Perhaps we could restrict human military development, she suggested. Allow them to remain in civilized space, but limit their weapons and ship production. Require them to submit to regular inspections. Jake finally spoke, his words cutting through the chatter like a knife. No. The single word echoed in the chamber and every alien eye turned to look at him. He had been patient for 3 days. He had listened to their insults and accusations without losing his temper. But now they wanted to treat humans like children, who needed supervision. "No," he said again, louder this time. "We will not accept restrictions on our ability to defend ourselves. We will not submit to inspections like we are criminals on parole. We are a free people, and we will remain free." The Vorthic ambassador clicked his mandibles in what Jake knew was their version of laughter. Free to do what? Free to build weapons. That could kill billions? Free to spread your violent culture to other worlds? Jake looked around the chamber at all the alien faces staring at him. Some showed fear. Others showed disgust. A few showed what might have been pity. None showed respect. "Free to be ready," Jake said quietly. "Free to be prepared when the real threat comes, because it will come. Somewhere out there in the dark between galaxies, something is moving toward us. Something that has been destroying civilizations for millions of years. And when it arrives, you are going to wish you had more humans standing beside you instead of fewer." The chamber fell completely silent. Even the automatic translation systems seemed to pause as if they were not sure they had. Heard correctly, Lisa activated her tablet and projected a hologram into the center of the room. It showed star maps with dozens of empty systems marked in red. 43 advanced civilizations have vanished from this galaxy in the past 1,000,000 years, she said. Not destroyed by war or plague or natural disaster. Just gone. Their planets stripped bare. Their suns dimmed. Their people erased as if they never existed. The hologram shifted to show ancient ruins and broken artifacts that human exploration teams had found in the outer systems. "We have been studying these dead worlds for decades," Lisa continued. "We have found warning messages carved in stone. Stories passed down through fragments of surviving data. They all tell the same story. Something came from outside the galaxy. Something that consumes entire civilizations." Several aliens began speaking at once, but Keeper Voss raised one crystalline hand, and they fell silent again. "Even if such a threat exists," he said carefully, "why should we believe that humans would be better equipped to face it than the rest of us combined?" Jake looked directly at the ancient Eldari and spoke with absolute certainty. "Because we are the only ones who take it seriously. We are the only ones preparing for the worst possible outcome. When that thing comes, and it will come, we will be ready to fight. The question is whether you will be ready to fight beside us, or whether you will face it alone." The vote was not even close. 45 species voted to banish humanity from civilized space. Only the Eldari and one small mining species abstained. As the gavel fell and the decision became final, Jake felt a mixture of anger and sadness wash over him. But there was something else, too. Relief. Now humans could prepare, without having to explain themselves to anyone. Now they could build the defenses they knew would be needed. Now they could get ready for the war that was coming, whether these aliens believed in it or not. As Jake and Lisa left the chamber for the last time, the human ambassador turned back to look at Keeper Voss. The ancient being's crystal form was pulsing with patterns that Jake's translator could not interpret. "When the darkness comes," Jake said loud enough for everyone to hear, "remember that we offered to stand with you. Remember that you chose to face it alone." 6 months had passed since the Council's decision, and Captain Ben Rodriguez watched the last transport ship cross into the unknown regions of space. The energy barrier that marked the edge of civilized space shimmered like a wall of blue fire. As his vessel New Horizon pushed through it with 15,000 colonists packed into every available space dot, behind him lay everything humanity had built among the stars. Research stations, mining colonies, trade outposts, and diplomatic centers all abandoned in the Great Exodus. 12 million humans had been forced to leave their homes because the galaxy's leaders feared what they might become. Ben's communication. Officer Amy Chun looked up from her console with worry in her eyes. Captain, we just lost contact with the last civilian convoy. They made it through the barrier, but we cannot reach them anymore. The barrier did more than just mark boundaries. It blocked most forms of long-range communication and made navigation nearly impossible. The aliens had built it centuries ago to keep dangerous things from entering their space, but now it served as a prison wall, keeping humans out. Any word from Admiral Stone? Ben asked as he watched the stars change outside his viewport. Out here beyond the barrier, the constellations looked different. Older somehow, as if they held secrets that civilized space had forgotten. Amy shook her head. The Defiant went dark 3 hours ago. All military vessels are operating under communication silence until we reach the rally point. Ben understood why Admiral Patricia Stone had ordered radio silence. There was no telling what might be listening in the void between galaxies. If Jake Morrison's warnings were true, then something was already out there, watching and waiting. Better to move quietly until they knew what they were dealing with. The New Horizon was one of 47 transport ships carrying civilians to their new homes in the Perseus sector. Dr. Nathan Price had identified 17 worlds that could support human life without too much terraforming. It would take years to build proper colonies, but at least they would have somewhere to start over dot in the depths of space. Captain Maria Santos commanded a very different kind of mission. Her ship Shadow Runner was built for stealth and reconnaissance, painted black as the void itself, and equipped with sensors that could detect a whisper from halfway across a solar system. Deploy the next monitoring station, Maria ordered as her crew worked to install another early warning beacon in the asteroid. Field around a dead star. These stations would form a network stretching along the galactic rim, watching for anything that might approach from the empty space between galaxies. Her chief, Engineer Tony Walker, wiped sweat from his forehead as he finished connecting the power cores. Captain, this is the 20th station we have deployed. How many more do we need? Maria pulled up the star charts on her command screen. Red dots marked where they had already placed monitoring stations, while blue dots showed where. More needed to go. Another 100 at least. Maybe 200 if we want complete coverage. Tony stared at the map in disbelief. That will take us years to finish. Are we really expecting something to come through? Maria had access to files that most humans would never see. Ancient texts recovered from dead civilizations, fragments of warnings carved into stone by species that had vanished without explanation. Mathematical models that showed disturbing patterns in galactic history. Tony, in the past 1,000,000 years, 43 advanced civilizations have simply stopped existing, not destroyed by war or disease or natural disasters. They just disappeared, as if someone had erased them from reality. She activated a holographic display that showed the locations where these civilizations had once thrived. A pattern was clear to anyone who knew how to look. Something had moved through the galaxy in a spiral pattern, consuming everything in its path before disappearing back into the void. Each time it happened, there were warning signs. Strange energy readings from deep space. Ships disappearing near the galactic edge. Unexplained interference with long-range communications. Then nothing for thousands of years until it happened. Again, somewhere else. Tony studied the display with growing understanding. You think it is coming back. I do not think anything, Maria said firmly. I know. The patterns are too consistent to be random. Something out there treats entire galaxies like feeding grounds. It comes, it consumes, it moves on to the next target. Meanwhile, on the other side of human space, Admiral Stone stood in. The command center of Haven's Gate, humanity's new military headquarters. The massive space station was still under construction, but its primary systems were already online and coordinating the defense of human territory. The war room buzzed with activity as officers and scientists worked together to analyze data from the monitoring stations. General Claire Johnson, commander of the Colonial Defense Force, studied reports from the outer perimeter, while Dr. Price ran calculations on his quantum computers. Admiral, we are receiving the first data packets from Captain Santos, reported Communications Specialist Danny Lee. The monitoring network is 30% complete and already detecting unusual readings. Stone walked over to the main display where Dr. Price was highlighting areas of concern on a three-dimensional map of local space. What kind of readings, Doctor? Price adjusted his glasses and pointed to several red zones on the map. Gravitational. Anomalies consistent with massive objects moving at impossible speeds. Energy signatures that do not match any known technology. And strangest of all, what appears to be organized radio silence from sectors that should be full of background noise. Radio silence? Space is never truly quiet, Admiral. There should always be electromagnetic radiation from stars, planets, cosmic phenomena, but these areas show nothing, as if something has absorbed every bit of energy in those regions. General. Johnson frowned as she studied the data. How far away are these anomalies? The closest is approximately 18 months away at current projected speed, Price replied. But Admiral, these readings suggest objects the size of moons moving faster than our best ships. If they are hostile, our conventional defenses will not be enough. Stone had been expecting this news, but hearing it confirmed still sent a chill down her spine. Jake Morrison had been right about the threat, but even he might not have imagined how massive it would be. Send a message to all colony ships, she ordered. Tell them to accelerate their settlement efforts. We need established bases as quickly as possible. What about the Council? Asked General Johnson. Should we warn them? Stone considered this carefully. The aliens had made their feelings about humanity very clear. They had chosen exile over cooperation. But if the threat was as serious as the data suggested, personal grudges would not matter. Send one message through the emergency diplomatic channels. Make it simple and direct. Tell them what we have detected and when we expect first contact. Include all our sensor data as proof. Danny worked quickly to compose and transmit the message. Within hours, it was racing towards civilized space at the speed of light, carrying humanity's warning to those who had cast them out. The response came back within a week, routed through the same emergency channels. Stone read it aloud to her assembled staff. Your attempts to create panic and force readmission to civilized space are noted and rejected. Any human vessels entering Council territory will be destroyed on sight. Do not contact us again. The war room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Humanity was alone in the darkness, with something terrible approaching, and the very people they were trying to save refused to believe the danger was real. Dr. Linda Foster, humanity's chief diplomatic officer, shook her head in frustration. They think we are lying. They think this is all some elaborate scheme to get back into the galaxy. Admiral Stone walked to the observation deck and looked out at the construction. Crews working around the clock to complete their defenses. Somewhere out there in the void, humanity's enemies were coming, and when they arrived, humans would face them alone. Then we prepare for war, Stone said quietly. And when the time comes, we do what we have always done. We protect those who cannot protect themselves, even if they hate us for it. Lieutenant Kevin Murphy had been alone at Outpost Zeta 7 for 4 months when his sensors detected something that made his blood turn cold. The monitoring station was little more than a metal box bolted to an asteroid at the edge of known space. But its instruments could see across half the galaxy when conditions were right. What Kevin saw moving through the void between stars defied every law of physics he had learned in training. The objects were massive beyond comprehension, each one larger than Earth's moon, but they moved through space like living creatures, swimming through water instead of following normal orbital mechanics. His hands shook as he activated the emergency beacon that would carry his message to Admiral Stone at Haven's Gate. The transmission would take 6 hours to reach human space, but every second of delay could mean the difference between preparation and catastrophe. Haven's Gate. This is Outpost Zeta-7 reporting Code Black Contact. I repeat, Code Black Contact. Unknown entities detected approaching from Andromeda Vector at impossible velocity. Transmitting all sensor data now. Murphy out. The entities he was watching seemed to be made of living shadow that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. When his instruments tried to analyze their composition, the readings made no sense. They appeared to be part organic tissue and part advanced technology, but somehow merged together into something completely new. As Kevin watched in horror, one of the shadow creatures approached a small star system that contained 3 planets. The creature extended what looked like massive tentacles that reached down to the planet's surfaces. Within minutes, the entire system began to dim, as if someone was slowly turning off the lights. Back at Haven's Gate, Admiral Stone was reviewing supply reports when the priority alert echoed through the command center. Officers rushed to their stations as Kevin's transmission played on the main speakers. His voice, typed with fear and disbelief, Dr. Price immediately began analyzing the sensor data that accompanied the message. His computers worked for hours to process the information while Stone paced the command deck, knowing that everything Jake Morrison had warned about was finally beginning. "Admiral," Price called out as his analysis finished, "you need to see this immediately." The main display showed a 3-dimensional map of the approaching entities. There were dozens of them, each one following a slightly different path, but all converging on the same general area of galactic space. Their estimated arrival time at the first Council worlds was 18 months. "What exactly are we looking at, Doctor?" Stone asked as she studied the impossible creatures moving across. Her screen. Price adjusted his instruments to show more detail. "Near as I can determine, they are some kind of hybrid organism. Part biological, part technological, but integrated in ways that should not be possible. They appear to be able to break down matter at the molecular level and convert it into more of themselves." General Johnson joined them at the display, her military mind already calculating defensive strategies. "How do we fight something like that?" "I am not sure we can," Price admitted. "Conventional weapons would be like throwing rocks at a hurricane, but there might be a way to disrupt their molecular absorption process if we can get close enough." Stone nodded grimly and turned to her communications officer. "Send word to all human colonies. Begin immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel to the core worlds. And get me a direct line to Commander Morrison." Jake Morrison was on the bridge of the newly constructed battleship Defiance when Stone's call reached him. He had come out of retirement to oversee the final preparations for what everyone now knew would be humanity's greatest test. "Jake, they are here," Stone said without preamble. "Just like you predicted. Kevin Murphy spotted them 18 hours ago, approaching from the Andromeda Vector." Morrison felt no satisfaction in being proven right. He had hoped with all his heart that he was wrong about the threat. "How long do we have?" 18 months until they reach the first Council worlds. Maybe 2 years before they get to us. Morrison studied the tactical displays surrounding his command chair. Human space was better defended now than it had been 3 years ago, but these creatures would test every defense they had built. "Patricia, we need to warn the Council one more time. Send them everything we have detected. Include full tactical analysis and our best estimates of what these things can do." "Jake, they will not listen. They think we are still trying to trick our way back into civilized space. Send it anyway. When this is over, I want history to record that we tried to save them, even after they cast us out. The second warning message reached Council space within days, carrying detailed sensor readings and tactical projections that painted a terrifying picture of what was approaching. This time, the data was so comprehensive and frightening that several species actually began to take notice. The Corvin Trade Federation was the first to break ranks and send a secret message to human space. Ambassador Kira Valen had always respected humanity's military capabilities, and she was smart enough to recognize genuine threat assessments when she saw them. Admiral Stone. Her message began. Our own deep space sensors are now detecting the same anomalies your people reported. The Corvin Federation is prepared to discuss mutual defense agreements despite the Council's official position. Similar messages began arriving from other species over the following weeks. The Eldari sent encrypted communications through back channels. Several mining guilds offered to share intelligence. Even some military commanders from species that had voted for humanity's exile began reaching out quietly, but the official council response remained unchanged. The Vorthic ambassador issued a public statement calling human reports fear-mongering designed to destabilize galactic peace. The Zephyrian collective dismissed the warnings as primitive paranoia from a violent species. Captain Santos watched from her hidden position as the first council world died. The Zephyrian agricultural planet Luminara had 6 billion inhabitants when the shadow creatures arrived. It took them less than 4 hours to consume everything. The attack was methodical and terrifying. The creatures descended from space, like a dark cloud, their tentacles reaching down to touch the planet's surface. Wherever they made contact, the ground began to dissolve and flow upward like liquid being sucked through a straw. Buildings crumbled as their molecular bonds were broken apart. Oceans boiled away as their water was converted into the raw materials the creatures needed. Even the electromagnetic patterns that made up Zephyrian consciousness were absorbed and incorporated into the growing mass of the film. Attackers. Santos transmitted everything she observed back to human space, knowing that Admiral Stone needed to see exactly what they would be facing. The creatures did not just kill their victims. They absorbed them completely, using their biological and technological distinctiveness to make themselves stronger. Within hours of Luminara's destruction, emergency broadcasts began flooding the galactic communication networks. Panic spread through council space as world after world reported strange readings from their deep space sensors. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, but their debates were interrupted by reports of more attacks. The creatures were not following predictable patterns. They struck randomly across a front that stretched thousands of light years, making it impossible to mount effective defenses. Some council species tried to evacuate their outer colonies, but the shadow creatures moved faster than most ships could travel. Others attempted to fight back with their energy weapons and particle beams, only to discover that their attacks were absorbed, just like everything else. Admiral Stone watched the tactical displays with growing concern as red indicators marked the fall of system after system. In just 2 weeks, the creatures had consumed over 30 worlds and showed no signs of slowing down. Admiral, Dr. Price reported, we are receiving individual distress calls from dozens of planetary governors. They are asking for our help even though their governments still refuse to acknowledge the threat. Stone looked around the command center at officers who had been branded as warmongers and exiled from civilized space. Now those same aliens who had cast them out were begging for help from the very people they had feared. Prepare the fleet, Stone ordered. We go in without official sanction. As far as the galaxy is concerned, we are pirates and rebels. But we do not abandon people to die, no matter what they have done to us. Colonel Pete Davis was already suiting up for combat when the orders reached his experimental strike force. His ships carried weapons that the Council had never seen before. designed specifically to fight enemies that conventional tactics could not touch. "Remember, people, we are flying into hell itself," Davis told his pilots over the communication system. "These things have destroyed every force sent against them so far, but we have something they have not faced yet. We have human stubbornness and the best nuclear weapons in the galaxy." As the human fleet prepared to jump into Council space for the first time in 3 years, Stone sent one final message to the Galactic Council. "This is Admiral Patricia Stone of the Human Colonial Defense Force. We are moving to engage the hostile entities threatening galactic civilization. All human forces are authorized to provide assistance to any species requesting aid, regardless of political considerations." The Battle of Corvin Prime began at dawn on a Tuesday when Colonel Pete Davis led his strike force through a field of debris that had once been the planet's orbital defense stations. The shadow creatures had consumed 3 council worlds in the Yosul. Past week in Corvin Prime was next on their list dot below them. 60 million Corvin civilians huddled in underground shelters while their silver-skinned leaders broadcast desperate pleas for help that the official council forces could not provide. The creatures attacking their world was the size of a small moon, its dark tentacles already reaching down to begin the feeding process. Davis watched his tactical display as his 12 ships approached the massive entity. His weapons officer, Lieutenant Carol Brown, reported that their experimental nuclear torpedoes were armed and ready, each one carrying enough destructive power to level a mountain range. "Remember what Dr. Price told us," Davis said over the communication system to his pilots. "These things absorb energy weapons like sponges soaking up water. But nuclear fission creates quantum disruptions that should interfere with their molecular absorption process." The first torpedo struck the creature's main mass and exploded in a brilliant flash of white light. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then cracks of normal space-time began to spread outward from the impact point as the creature's dark matter started to destabilize. The shadow entity recoiled from the planet's surface, its tentacles writhing in what might have been pain or confusion. For the first time since the attacks began, one of the creatures had been hurt by something the defenders threw at it. "All ships, focus fire on the damaged area," Davis ordered as he watched the cracks spread through the creature's form. "Do not let it recover." Wave after wave of nuclear weapons slammed into the destabilizing entity. Each explosion created more quantum disruptions until the creature's entire structure began to collapse in on itself. Within an hour, the massive shadow that had been consuming Corvin Prime dissolved into harmless particles that scattered into space. The rescue operation that followed became the stuff of legend. Human transport ships dove through Corvin Prime's atmosphere while the creature was still dying, loading as many civilians as they could carry before more shadow entities arrived to investigate the destruction of their companion. Captain Rodriguez piloted his ship New Horizon through streets that were already beginning to dissolve as smaller creatures moved in to finish what the large one had started. His crew worked frantically to load refugees while the city crumbled around them. "Captain, we are at maximum capacity," reported his first officer as another 1,000 Corvon families crowded into the cargo holds. "The ship cannot handle any more passengers." Rodriguez looked out at the crowds of civilians still waiting for evacuation. Parents held their children close, while elders leaned on walking sticks, all of them looking up at the human ships with hope in their black eyes. "Make room," Rodriguez ordered. "We leave no one behind." By the time the rescue fleet departed Corvin Prime, they had saved nearly 40 million civilians. The remaining 20 million had either been consumed by the creatures or were trapped in areas too dangerous to reach. It was not a complete victory, but it proved that the shadow entities could be fought and defeated. The broadcast of the battle spread across the galaxy within days. For the first time since the attacks began, Council species saw footage of the creatures being destroyed instead of consuming everything in their path. The quantum torpedoes that human engineers had developed became the most requested technology. In galactic history, Admiral Stone stood in the command center at Haven's Gate, watching reports flood in from across Council space. Governments that had voted to exile humanity 3 years ago were now begging for military assistance and weapons technology. "Admiral, we are receiving formal requests for aid from 18 different species," reported communications specialist Danny Lee. "The Vorthic Federation is offering to share their manufacturing capabilities if we will provide them with nuclear torpedo designs." Stone nodded, but her expression remained grim as she studied the tactical displays. The victory at Corvin Prime was encouraging, but it was only one battle in a war that stretched across thousands of star systems. "What is our current fleet strength?" she asked General Johnson. 47 combat vessels equipped with quantum torpedoes, plus another 100 ships still being retrofitted with the new weapons. "We have enough firepower to engage small groups of creatures, but if they mass their forces, we will be overwhelmed." Dr. Price looked up from his analysis computers with even worse news. "Admiral, our deep space sensors are detecting larger formations moving toward the galactic core. Some of these entities are 10 times bigger than the one we destroyed at Corvin Prime." The strategic situation was becoming clearer every day. The shadow creatures were not just randomly attacking systems. They were following a plan that would allow them to consume the galaxy's most important worlds while preventing any organized resistance from forming. Captain Santos watched from her hidden monitoring station as 3 more Council worlds died. In a single day, the creatures had learned from their defeat at Corvin Prime and were now attacking in coordinated groups that made nuclear strikes more difficult. "Haven's Gate, this is Shadowrunner reporting," Santos transmitted through the encrypted military channels. "The entities are adapting their tactics. They are using smaller creatures as shields while the large ones feed. Recommend immediate changes to our attack strategies." Back at human headquarters, the War Council was in constant session as officers, and scientists worked around the clock to develop new weapons and tactics. The quantum torpedoes had given them an edge, but the creatures were already finding ways to counter them. Dr. Linda Foster entered the command center with news that changed everything. "Admiral, I have just received a priority transmission from Keeper Voss of the Eldari Council. They are calling for an emergency session to formally request human military assistance." Stone felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness at the news. Humanity had warned them this would happen, but she took no pleasure in being proven right. Too many people had already died because the Council had refused to listen. "What are the terms?" Stone asked. "Complete amnesty for all humans in exile, full restoration of citizenship rights, and a formal apology from the Galactic Council for their error in judgment." Stone considered the offer carefully. 3 years ago, such terms would have seemed like a dream come true. Now they felt hollow in the face of the massive losses the galaxy had already suffered. "Tell Keeper Voss that we will discuss terms after we finish saving his people. Right now, we have a war to fight." The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened aboard the mobile station, sanctuary since their original chambers had been consumed the week before. Of the original 47 member species, only 28 remained. The others had either been completely destroyed or had lost so many worlds that they could no longer maintain representatives. Admiral Stone stood in the same spot where Jake Morrison had been condemned 3 years earlier. But now the surviving delegates looked at her with desperate hope instead of fear and contempt. The ancient Eldari Council leader Keeper Voss spoke for all of them when he said, "We were wrong to exile your people. We were wrong to ignore your warnings. We were wrong to fear your strength when we should have celebrated it." Stone looked around the chamber at representatives of species that had called humanity too violent and too dangerous for civilized society. Now those same beings were begging for human violence to save them from extinction. "We did not come here to receive apologies," Stone said quietly. "We came here to end this war. The question is whether you are prepared to do what is necessary to win." The Vorthic ambassador, one of the few original council members still alive, clicked his mandibles in their gesture of agreement. "What do you need from us?" Stone activated a holographic display that showed the current tactical situation across the galaxy. Red zones marked areas under creature control, while blue zones showed where human forces were still fighting. "We need every ship you can spare equipped with quantum weapons. We need your manufacturing facilities converted to military production. And most importantly, we need to coordinate a final strike at the galactic core before these creatures consume the central black hole." The chamber erupted in confused chatter as the delegates tried to understand what Stone was suggesting. "If they succeed in breaking down the black hole at our galaxy's center," Stone continued, "the gravitational disruption will tear apart every remaining solar system. This is not just about saving individual worlds anymore. This is about preventing the complete annihilation of all organic life in our galaxy." Keeper Voss pulsed with patterns of deep concern. "How long do we have?" "Our best estimates suggest 6 months before they reach the core. After that, it will be too late for any of us." The vote to grant humanity full military authority over the combined galactic defense was unanimous. As the session ended, Stone felt the weight of an entire galaxy's survival resting on her shoulders. She had 6 months to organize the largest military operation in galactic history. 6 months to coordinate dozens of species that had never worked together before. 6 months to prevent the extinction of every living thing they had sworn to protect. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the massive warship Unity as it approached the swirling chaos at the center of the galaxy. Around him, the largest fleet in galactic history moved through space like a river of metal and light, carrying the hopes of every surviving species toward their final confrontation with extinction. The ship itself was a marvel of desperate cooperation. Human nuclear weapons sat alongside Zephyrian energy shields, while Vorthic navigation systems worked with Eldari quantum computers to guide them through the gravitational storms surrounding the galactic core. Every surviving species had contributed something to this last chance at survival. "Admiral Stone, this is Morrison reporting," Jake said into his communication system. "The combined fleet has reached the outer perimeter of the core region. We are detecting massive creature formations surrounding the central black hole." Back at Haven's Gate, Admiral Stone watched the tactical displays with growing concern. The shadow creatures had been busy during the 6 months it took to organize the fleet. They had built structures around the black hole that defied understanding. Massive constructs that seemed to be feeding on the gravitational energy itself. "Jake, our long-range sensors show over 300 large entities in defensive positions around the core. They know we are coming." Morrison studied his own displays as the fleet moved deeper into the dangerous region where space itself was twisted by the immense gravity of the galactic center. The creatures waiting for them were larger than anything they had faced before, some of them bigger than entire star systems. "All ships, this is Morrison." He broadcast to the thousands of vessels following him into battle. "Remember what we are fighting for. Not just our worlds or our lives, but the right of consciousness itself to exist in this universe. Today, we prove that organic life will not go quietly into the darkness." The battle began when the creatures detected the approaching fleet and launched their own attack. Waves of smaller entities swept toward the Galactic Defense Force like a tide of living shadow, their forms shifting and flowing as they moved through the twisted space around the black hole. Captain Davis led the first wave of human fighters. Into the swarm, his pilots launching quantum torpedoes at point-blank range, while dodging tentacles that could crush their ships like insects. The space around them lit up with nuclear fire as human weapons tore holes in the creature formations. "Focus on the big ones," Davis ordered as his squadron engaged a creature the size of a moon. "Do not let them reach the support ships." Behind the fighters, the main battle line opened up with everything they had. Human dreadnoughts fired salvos of nuclear missiles, while alien cruisers added their own weapons to the barrage. The combined firepower was enough to destroy planets, but the creatures absorbed most of it and kept coming. Dr. Price watched from the Unity's science station as his instruments analyzed the enemy formations. "Commander, the large creatures are using the smaller ones as living shields. Our weapons are not penetrating deep enough to cause critical damage." Morrison nodded grimly as he watched his fleet taking heavy casualties. They had known this would be the hardest battle ever fought, but the reality was worse than anyone had imagined. The creatures seemed endless, and every ship they lost weakened their chances of victory. "All human vessels, this is Morrison. Execute Plan Omega. I repeat, execute Plan Omega." Plan Omega was humanity's last desperate strategy. If conventional attacks could not penetrate the creatures' defenses, then they would have to get inside and attack from within. Human Marines in powered armor would board the largest entities and plant nuclear charges at critical points in their structure. Lieutenant Carol Brown led the first boarding party through the hull of a creature that was slowly consuming a nearby star. Her team moved through passages that looked more like living tissue than any kind of technology, following readings that showed them where the creature's core systems were located. "This is insane," muttered Sergeant Tim Parker as they planted their nuclear charges in what appeared to be the creature's equivalent of a brain. "We are literally inside a living nightmare." The charges detonated in sequence, sending quantum disruptions through the creature's nervous system. The massive entity convulsed and began to break apart, its death throes creating gravitational waves that shook nearby ships. Across the battlefield, similar boarding actions were taking place as human Marines fought their way into the hearts of creatures that had never faced such tactics before. The aliens who had once called humans too violent watched in amazement as human soldiers sacrificed themselves to plant bombs inside enemies that conventional weapons could not touch. The creatures were learning and adapting. They began producing antibodies that hunted down the human boarding parties, and their formations became tighter to prevent further penetration. The battle was turning into a war of attrition that the defenders could not win. "Morrison, this is Stone," came the Admiral's voice over the communication system. "We are losing too many ships. The creatures are adapting faster than we can change our tactics." Morrison looked out at the swirling mass of enemies surrounding the galactic core and made the hardest decision of his life. "Patricia, prepare to execute the final option." The final option was something they had hoped never to use. Every human ship carried a special quantum bomb that could create a cascade reaction in the fabric of space itself. If detonated simultaneously at the galactic core, the combined explosion would destroy everything within 1,000 light years, including the attacking fleet. "Jake, that will kill everyone," Stone protested. "There has to be another way." "There is no other way," Morrison replied quietly. "If we fail here, these creatures will consume every star in the galaxy. At least this way, we save the outer systems and give organic life a chance to rebuild." The order went out to every ship in the fleet. Human vessels began moving into final positions around the galactic core, while their alien allies provided covering fire. The creatures seemed to sense that something had changed and their attacks became more desperate. Captain Santos piloted her ship Shadowrunner toward the heart of the enemy formation, her cargo hold filled with enough quantum explosives to crack a planet. Around her, Dozens of other human ships were making similar suicide runs. All ships, this is Morrison. It has been an honor to serve with you. When the history of this galaxy is written, let them remember that we stood together at the end. Humanity leads the charge. The quantum bombs detonated simultaneously in a flash of light that could be seen from the other side of the galaxy. The explosion created a chain reaction that tore through the creatures' formations like wildfire. Their dark matter structures unable to withstand the fundamental disruption of space-time itself. When the light faded, the galactic core was empty, except for the slowly cooling debris of the final battle. The creatures that had threatened to consume all organic life were gone, destroyed by the species they had underestimated. Admiral Stone received the final transmission from the Unity just before the explosions began. Morrison's voice was calm and steady as he spoke his last words. Patricia, tell the galaxy that humanity kept its promise. We stood with them at the end, just like we said we would. Now rebuild and remember. Remember that sometimes the ones you fear the most are the ones who will die to protect you. The aftermath of the Battle of the Galactic Core lasted for months as rescue ships searched for survivors and began the long process of rebuilding galactic civilization. Only a few hundred ships from the original fleet had escaped the final explosion, carrying news of humanity's sacrifice to the surviving worlds. The Galactic Council's new chambers were built on Haven's Gate, humanity's former military headquarters. The first act of the reformed government was to declare Jake Morrison and every human who died in the final battle as heroes of the galaxy, their names carved into monuments on every surviving world. Keeper Voss spoke for all the surviving species. When he addressed the memorial ceremony, we called them violent. We called them dangerous. We were right about both things, but we were wrong about what those qualities meant. When the darkness came for us all, humanity's violence became our salvation, and their danger became our shield. Admiral Stone, now the senior military commander for the entire galaxy, stood before the memorial wall where 10 million human names were etched in stone. Each name represented someone who had died defending people who had once cast them out. They warned us, Stone said quietly. We ignored them. They prepared anyway. When the time came, they fought for us even though we had exiled them. That is what makes someone human. Not the violence or the danger, but the willingness to stand between the darkness and those who need protection. The galaxy would rebuild. In the years to come, new worlds would be settled and new technologies would be developed. The threat from beyond the stars was ended and organic. Life was safe to grow and flourish once again. But the lesson of humanity's exile and redemption would never be forgotten. Sometimes the ones who prepare for war are the ones who understand peace the most. Sometimes the ones you fear are the ones who will save you when everything else fails. And sometimes being right is the most terrible burden of all.